These walls are gross. Yeah, they don't look good, but they're also spider hotels, and I don't like that very much. I try to spend a lot of time away from these walls. I don't lean anything against them. I don't go near them. They're a lot of wasted space. About a 4-foot perimeter around this building doesn't get used because I don't want to get near this crap. So I'm going to add walls to the interior from that purlin all the way down to the floor, all the way around the inside of this building. It'll cover up all of this gross, and behind these walls I'll add more insulation, because why not? The easiest way to add walling to a building like this would be to buy some 10-foot long steel roofing panels, screw them to these purlins, blow in insulation behind it, and be done with it. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use OSB for my walling, and then I'll paint it white, for the simple reason that it's easier to screw stuff to OSB, and for shop walls you want ease of screwability. More utility. Unfortunately, the downside of using OSB is that to give it something to screw to on the wall, I'll have to add 2x4 framing between all these purlins, which is an extra step. But before I can do that, I need to scrape out all this foam on the floor. Give it a good cleaning. And remove anything from the walls that isn't supposed to be there. First things first, I need to attach this footer or toe board, whatever you can call it, directly to the concrete. Now I could use construction adhesive or concrete screws, but those methods are boring and slow. So I bought an explodey hammer. If you're not familiar with one of these things, it uses a .22 caliber round to fire a nail directly into the concrete. This is a gun for construction. That didn't work at all. Oh. That was surprisingly quiet. Whoa! That one worked. Why is it so loose? Is it just chipping out the concrete? No? Oh. Well, that's not working at all. Oh yeah, it just breaks the concrete apart. It's just too close to the edge. Vertical framing. This is how I plan to do the vertical framing. Inset into the wall, integrated in with the purlins of the building. It doesn't add any thickness to the wall. It's very strong. It's a very neat installation. But this is way too much work. So instead I'm going to take my 10-foot long 2x4s and bolt them straight to the purlins. This is going to be significantly easier, but there is one downside. It's a big one. I'm going to lose 3.5 inches of floor space. Now I know this is a huge sacrifice, but it's one I'm willing to make. I made a discovery. This thing, this thing, it may be useless for concrete, but you know what it's not useless for? It will hammer a nail into steel. Now it is a nail. I can, if I try really hard, pull it out of the steel, so I can also go back in and put a screw in there, but it's held in place. So it makes it much easier to do the screw thing. That drill bit doesn't reach. I went out and bought the trigger-activated version of the explodey hammer, and it feels wrong. This doesn't feel like a piece of construction equipment. I got it so I can hold the board with one hand and then do this one-handed rather than having to hold the thing and then hit it with a hammer. But like I said, this feels wrong. Oh, wow. Can you see what I did wrong? When I put in all those top spacer pieces, I started with a misaligned board, and that propagated all down the line, so all these vertical pieces have a slight parabola to them. Not going to really affect anything, it's just annoying and embarrassing. And I didn't notice it till all the way down there, where I put in that shorter piece to straighten things out, but there were only 3 boards left when I did that. Framing's done, and it looks brilliant. Not that wall's still crooked, but the rest of it looks brilliant. Now it's time to put up the shop drywall, otherwise known as OSB, otherwise known as chipboard, otherwise known as oriented strand board, otherwise known as, they get the idea. You get it. And to make this job a lot faster, I bought something I saw on Cremona and Donovan do house, a colleted screw gun. Collated? Colleted. Whatever, it's got a bunch of screws on a belt. and it goes whoop, whoop, whoop. And to power this thing, I've got my EcoFlow Delta Max down there because part of the process of renovating this building and putting up all these walls involved ripping out almost all of the outlets in this building. All right, let's see how much this changes my life. Not a good start. Works good. I'm actually starting to hate this thing. Learning as I'm going along here, this concrete floor isn't quite as flat as I thought it was. I'm still going to put the OSB sheets on the floor on the next wall, but for the next wall, I'm going to scribe the edges so they meet up a little bit. Like these two, there's about, I don't know, a 1/4 of an inch gap between them, and over here there's a 1/2 inch gap between those. So if I scribe the edges and cut them to match, then they'll fit together better. And this piece sits on a little bit of a hump, so I've screwed my saw track to the top just to cut off that little bit that sticks up past this panel and past this panel, so that when I put the next sheets of OSB on top of this, they'll sit flush. This is what I'm using to scribe the walls. It's a locking wing divider I got from Harbor Freight. I ground the tip off of one end, and this is a marker that fits in there. But to make it fit, I actually had to turn it down on the lathe. Very easy to turn down this plastic on the lathe, but it fits now. Good. That rigid screw gun was trash, so I returned it. Okay, that's kind of a lie. I threw it in a fit of rage because it was so infuriating and broke it, so I couldn't return it. Instead, I threw it in the trash. Not my proudest moment, but instead I replaced it with this from Synco. And it's marginally better. It's less infuriating, so I guess that's all I can hope for. First layer's in. Now, all these pieces have been scribed and cut to fit together without gaps, or with minimal gaps, because they're all sitting on the floor and therefore follow the contours of the floor. I don't want that error to propagate upward, so what I did next was turn off the lights and set up a self-leveling laser and marked a level line all the way around the top. So now I'm going to go around with my track, screw the track to these boards, and cut off that level line so the next layers of OSB start level rather than following the contours of the floor. The reason I put these short panels on top of the full panels is because I'm splitting this wall into two halves. There's a steel purlin right about here, which makes for a good dividing line for insulation, because I'll be blowing in cellulose insulation into this newly formed wall cavity to, you know, add extra insulation. By the way, that was one of the downsides of putting this framing in front of the purlins. It made my wall cavity about 10 inches. Do I need almost an R50 of insulation in the walls? No, but I'm going to have it. Here goes nothing. As you might be able to see, this blower I rented was a pile of garbage. It could barely blow insulation through the hose, much less into the wall. It's the next day, and since the last insulation blower sucked rocks but would not blow them, the rental company gave me this one for free. It's actually meant for fiberglass blow-in insulation, but it shouldn't make a difference. The only main difference is that this intake tube is shaped for a different size bag than the cellulose insulation, so it'll be a little bit more annoying to load it up. But thankfully, this one has a remote, and this one has hose fittings. The last one didn't. They told me to duct tape the hoses together, and it had no remote, so I had to walk over here to shut it off, which, if you're blowing in insulation, is way more trouble than it's worth. So hopefully this goes better. Wish me luck. It's been over a month, but I'm back at it now. Putting up the second half of the wall was just the same as the first. I put up the OSB, switching to a different screw driving method halfway through because the first one made me angry. I rented a cellulose blower that didn't work. Again? So I had to replace it with a fiberglass blower that did work. Again.
Yes. Ah, stop it! Stop!
But this time I enlisted the help of my dad's. I made him shove bags into a machine because I was tired of running back and forth. And the rest of the job went smoothly and very dirtily. Cellulose may not be as itchy as fiberglass, but it sure is dustier. Stepcraft. Do hole plugs. Holes are plugged. The whole room is taped and papered. Now there's only one thing left to do. I'm going to try out this Harbor Freight HVLP electric gun that I got a couple of years ago for painting the other room. Don't expect it to work very well. If not, I'll go rent an airless sprayer tomorrow. Done! I was getting sick of this project and just wanted it to be done, so I finished the rest of the paint, all of the electrical, and the installation of that mini split up there, completely off camera, just so I could get it done. Before I painted these walls, I knew that these edges didn't line up super well, but after I painted them, those misalignments really popped. In fact, in some places, the gaps were so noticeable, I felt the need to shove my caulk in there to hide them a little bit. I haven't painted over the caulk yet, but I will get to that. In the end, though, it's a functional wall in a shop made out of OSB. Nobody expects it to look perfect, so I don't really care. But if you don't like it, feel free to let me know in future videos that I film in this room. Just leave a comment that's expressing your disapproval of my misaligned wall sheets. That way you can get it off your chest. And you're watching my video, so I win too. I need to address the insulation disparity because in the ceiling and the upper section of the walls, I have about an R11 insulation value. In the walls, I have an R50. Nears makes no difference. An enormous differential. Now, normally you want more insulation in the ceiling than in the walls. I got it the other way around. In the future, I would like to extend these walls all the way to the ceiling and then add a ceiling and blow in insulation into all those cavities so I have a nice, fully enveloped insulative structure. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as is because I want to be done with this. I'll do that next year. Electrical. Yeah, I installed outlets back on the walls. That's really all there is to it. I did it myself, so I saved a bunch of money, but yeah, that's all there is. Mini split! I bought and installed a Mr. Cool 36,000 BTU reversible heat pump mini split. Do I think 36,000 BTU is enough for the size of building it's in? It'll definitely make a dent, but I don't know if it's actually all the way enough. But if it isn't, in the future, I can add insulation to the ceiling like I plan to do anyway, and if that isn't enough, then I could just add a second mini split to the other side of the building. Previously, I've had a relationship with Pioneer mini splits. I've installed like 6 of the things. In fact, if you want to take a look at the description below this video, there's a link for my affiliate code for Pioneer mini splits, but this time I decided to go with a Mr. Cool unit to try it out. And they're exactly the same. They are very obviously made in the same factory. In fact, this remote here that says Mr. Cool on it is not only identical to the remote that comes with the Pioneer units, it's interoperable. That said, the Mr. Cool has a couple of bonuses. It's marginally cheaper. I could buy it off Amazon with free shipping, which made it incredibly easy. It came with a couple of accessories for free that the Pioneer doesn't, and most importantly of all, is the refrigerant lines. They come pre-charged with quick connect fittings. With the Pioneer mini split, you got to mess about with flares, a vacuum pump, and a manifold gauge. With this, you just twist the lines together. That's it. It makes the installation process so much less stressful. Otherwise, the units are identical. I wanted to talk real quick about the accessories that Mr. Cool comes with. This cute little thermostat here and a little USB dongle that sits in the mini split that gives it Wi-Fi. Because they're implemented so stupidly. The way the remote works is the settings are stored on the remote. So anytime you change any of the settings on the remote, no matter what they are, all of those settings get blasted to the mini split, and the remote settings become the mini split settings. That's also how the thermostat works. And these two don't communicate. So you could have on the remote the mini split set to air conditioning, 65 degrees, fan speed high, and you could have this thermostat set to heat, 85 degrees, fan speed low. You change anything on this remote, it's going to go back into air conditioning. You change anything on this thermostat, it's going to go back into heat. You could have a battle between the two remotes, and they don't talk to each other, and the mini split does not transmit information back to the remote or this thermostat. So if you change any of the settings over Wi-Fi, like if I don't know, it's set to 70 right here. If I set the mini split to 75, that's not reflected on this remote or this thermostat. So you have 3 different states of being, and none of these things talk to each other properly, and it's really stupid. And that's it. The bus room project is now done, so I can move on to other things. A little not happy with myself that I came up with 15 other things to do to this building, and now I'm fixated on them, and I want to tackle them now. But I need to not. I have other things to move on to. Now, I wanted to talk about electrical real quick. Like I said, I did all this wiring myself, and I came up with a brilliant way to save a bunch of money. Because in this conduit here, normally there's copper wires. But copper is very expensive. So I thought, hey, the conduit itself is conductive. Why not hook that straight up to the breaker? So that's what I did. I connected this conduit up straight to the breaker, and that is my wiring. I think this is brilliant. All you have to do is not touch it. I don't know why no one's ever thought of this, but